like to introduce Bridgette Becker, is a nutrition consultant, yoga instructor, and holistic health practitioner with over 25 years of dynamic experience. She has worked alongside pioneers in the field of nutrition, gut health, detoxification, and chronic illness, supporting people on their path toward balance and renewed mind, body, spirit health in her life's work and practice. Welcome, Bridgette.
Hi.
Bridgette, let me start with my first question. What is nervous system dysregulation?
So nervous system dysregulation is really what it sounds like, which is that, our nervous systems are dysregulated, or someone's nervous system is dysregulated. I think that what is not well understood is how common this is, and really what the consequences of it are, how it's affecting all of us on a day-to-day basis, and how many of our habits and behaviors contribute to this being even more compounded, and how to kind of mitigate it.
And you said that it happens more common than we think. So what symptoms do we should look for?
Well, so with nervous system dysregulation, our nervous system is obviously connected to every other system. So there's an emerging field that actually is looking at the relationship between the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine system, and the neurological system, and how all of that impacts our physical health, mental health, emotional health, all of our well-being. And I love it because it's starting to put the pieces together so that people start to see that everything's connected. We're really used to looking at the body in parts, but it's all connected. And so with our nervous system, there are two main modes of operation, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Human beings are really by design supposed to spend the majority of our time in a parasympathetic state, which is our rest and digest, our relaxation state. But most of us spend more time in the sympathetic state, which is that, fight or flight or freeze. It's the stress response, the activated response. We sort of move through life in that place, and we're adapted to it, but it's not good for our health, and it's not good for our body. So nervous system dysregulation is, interestingly, it's sort of where most people are functioning from, but it is by default a maladaptive pattern and a symptom of dysregulation. How that could present when you understand that the nervous system is connected to everything else, it could translate as hormone imbalances. It could translate as blood sugar imbalances. It could translate as, issues with weight management. It could translate as mood disorders, because our nervous system has a role in hormones and what hormones we produce and at what rate. That's the adrenals and the thyroid and the hypothalamus. It has a role in inflammation because cortisol is part of the stress response. And if we're circulating too much cortisol over an extended period of time, that's going to interfere with immune function and lead to higher levels of inflammation. So it's extensive.
I see. And how do we resolve this?
So if it was that simple, I mean, realistically,
we have all the time, Bridgette, so we would love to hear.
So in a perfect world, I mean, to sum it up, we would have the ability, meaning adequate resources, to be able to focus less on productivity and prioritize our health, and be able to see our health and taking care of our health actually as being productive. So that just means, we would be having a good work-life balance, not exhausting ourselves with, a lot of my clients work 15-hour days, 14-hour days, and they do that 5-6 days a week. And then they're still available on weekends. And that's going to take its toll. That's going to dysregulate the nervous system. So it's, really pulling back and having a look at our commitments, both work and personal, and if there is actually balance, and if there isn't, being willing to make the adjustments to shift that, to gradually change our level of commitments. And I mean, if it's within our resources, that may mean, having a little bit less income, but having more happiness and having more peace and having more enjoyment and joy in our lives. And then also there are foods that will create more inflammation in the body and that will irritate the nervous system. So it's changing what we're eating and we're drinking to lessen the toll on the nervous system. Anything that's caffeinated is going to artificially put your body into something like a stress response. It's going to cause the adrenals to produce more cortisol. So if people are having 4 cups of coffee a day and then also having iced tea, that's a black iced tea, and maybe having pre-workout before they work out that's caffeinated, and then possibly having some more caffeine in the evening if they have, dinner engagements, that's going to irritate the nervous system. Sugar irritates the nervous system. Alcohol irritates the nervous system. And then obviously any processed food, anything that's got artificial flavors, artificial chemicals, artificial sweeteners, a lot of those are excitotoxins, and even some agricultural chemicals will irritate the nervous system. So it's getting rid of all of those things. And then it's bringing in foods that are nourishing. So that's going to be a primarily plant-based diet, also a very high fiber diet, which would happen by default if you're going plant-based. And that's going to help all the systems of the body run better. It's going to help the gut microbiome, which is also tied to the nervous system, and having foods that have adequate essential fatty acids. So your omega-3, 6s, and 9s, particularly the omega-3s, they also nourish the nervous system. And then using things like adaptogens. So therapeutic mushrooms, reishi, maitake, turkey tail, lion's mane, all of those also will help nourish the nervous system. And you can use in supplement form something like ashwagandha or holy basil or rhodiola, because all of those essentially help your body deal with the physical effects of stress. And then the other piece that I would say is important, it's a little bit more of a, it's a sensitive subject. I wish it wasn't so, but it is that if people, even have the slight thought that they might have any unresolved trauma, had a difficult childhood, had a window of their life where there were a lot of painful situations or circumstances, and they didn't get to work through that with support. Maybe they kind of had to compartmentalize and push it away. Often that's locked in the body somewhere, and that will dysregulate the nervous system. And as you work through that, the nervous system starts to heal. So you see that in, like PTSD. What happens a lot is that somebody will smell something or they'll hear something, and it will trigger a memory that they're not even conscious of. And that will send their nervous system into this entire response based on whenever that traumatic incident occurred. So we all have a lot of healing to do.
That's so true. I wanted to just go back to the previous questions about what are the symptoms. So if an average person doesn't have, hormone imbalances or any tangible systems and says, I'm fine, and, works every day, goes to their workout, has their coffee, what other subtle symptoms they should watch for to be proactive?
Feeling fatigue in the morning, tired in the morning. It's hard to get up and get going without some kind of coffee or stimulation. Restless sleep, water retention, mood swings, headaches, rashes or itchy skin, digestive issues, so heartburn, acid reflux, SIBO, alternating constipation, diarrhea, IBS type pattern. That would be off the top of my head. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I had an interview recently with a doctor in the gastro arena, and he mentioned how stress affects and creates SIBO. So yeah.
Well, because the sympathetic nervous system, our parasympathetic is known as the rest and digest, and if you think about the state that most people are eating in, most people are consuming their food when they're in that sympathetic state. And when we're in the sympathetic, your body doesn't produce the chemicals, so it doesn't produce adequate hydrochloric acid or digestive enzymes to actually break your food down. And you won't have peristalsis, which is the movement of the intestines, until you are once again in that parasympathetic mode.
And what percentage would you say people are in that sympathetic mode?
In the stress state or in the relaxed state?
No, on average, people in general, where are they falling into which mode?
More in the sympathetic, more in the stress state than in the parasympathetic. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I very rarely, I mean, unless someone is really consciously chosen to maybe take a sabbatical and do some self-reflection, or, you know, they're really actively engaging a meditation practice. And it's not easy because it's a little bit like swimming upstream. You know, you're going against the grain. You're making a very different choice than what our culture would tell you to do. So it's not necessarily the easiest choice, but for longevity and to avoid chronic health issues and really see what's possible with your health, it's the right choice.
Absolutely. So what conditions are nervous system dysregulation associated with?
Everything.
You please do list them.
So basically all autoimmune disorders would be associated with nervous system dysregulation. Any GI disorder, there would probably be some component of nervous system dysregulation. Mood disorders also, so anxiety, depression. I mean, I would say a lot of the personality disorders may not originate there, but will certainly be affected by it. Heart disease, all heart disease issues will be either triggered or exacerbated by nervous system dysregulation. Let's see. And then, you know, I do often see, and it's just such a, I mean, it's a whole other, you know, Pandora's box that we would be opening, but where people are really having hormonal trouble and hormonal difficulty as it relates to weight management. I really see that stress plays such a huge role. And it's a tough one because people really they don't want to tackle their stress and they don't want to tackle that nervous system dysregulation. And it's not something people are used to seeing as a contributing factor to, you know, their weight gain or their problem with shedding pounds. Like, especially if you look at what's gone on in the last couple of years, people think, well, if I just manipulate my calories and I just exercise more, then it's going to work out. But if you're not working with that cortisol and the insulin that is happening every time you go through your stress cycling, you're still going to hit a wall.
That's very interesting because many people do ask about hormones and weight gain.
Yeah.
So that's a main factor you're saying in helping them reverse that.
Well, assuming that people are, I mean, the thing is that there's blood sugar and hormones go together. So that relates to the timing of people eating, obviously what people are eating, because if you're eating, obviously if you're eating things that are just sugary or convert to sugars really easily, that's not going to help you. But assuming someone's having a balanced diet, then every single time you go through a stress response, you have a cortisol surge, which most people know. But what accompanies every cortisol surge is a blood sugar spike. And insulin is the primary fat storage hormone for the body, not cortisol. So cortisol, you know, has its contribution, but insulin is the primary fat storage hormone for the body. So if somebody is just stress cycling all over the place, then they're going to have blood sugar issues. Insulin is a hormone. It's going to contribute to hormone imbalance, and they're going to hold weight. You see it with gestational diabetes.
That's very interesting. I feel like it's like the chicken and the egg. Which one starts first?
Right.
The cortisol or the insulin? Like people do complain from sugar cravings, and they do have that cortisol high in them. Which one starts first? Where should they tackle first?
I mean, I think that I don't know if we can always figure out where it started, but I think that we have to shift our behaviors to bring the body back into balance. And so what I find is, and this is another sticky spot. When I'm working with people to bring stability back so that they can lose weight, because your body has to know that food is coming, and that it's coming in a relatively predictable fashion, and that it's going to have protein that's going to stabilize the blood sugar, and fiber, which also, and fat. They all are going to help with creating that blood sugar stability. And so if somebody's been all over the place and really erratic in their patterns and with their eating, that's stressful to the body, and your body's going to hold because it doesn't know when it's getting nourishment. Metabolism is going to slow down, and because there's nothing consistent. And so as you start to deliver the consistency, your body knows what it's getting, your nervous system starts to quiet down, and then you'll see people's appetite times change. So often when I first start working with people, they'll say, I'm not hungry at all in the morning. I can make it all the way until 1 o'clock. I'm not even hungry. But then I just completely lose control after that. And a lot of that, the reason why they lose control is because they've gone too long. And so now they're in a stress response. When we're in a stress response, we don't have impulse control and we don't have rational thought. So we're not making the best choices as it relates to food. We've stressed the body out. So if you have something to eat in the morning, which is really when we are supposed to be eating, it helps to set up blood sugar stability for the day. Typically, if people aren't hungry in the morning, it's because they have dysregulated cortisol. Cortisol is supposed to go up in the morning, but for a lot of people, it doesn't, because they're not sleeping well, because they're not going to bed at a decent hour. And so their cortisol isn't rising in the morning like it needs to. They don't have an appetite. And so you can't trust your appetite in that situation. You have to retrain your body back to a rhythm that's going to work. And I know that the next question that typically will come up around that is with the intermittent fasting, because that's so popular right now.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if people are really wanting to intermittent fast, I'll usually tell them, then skip dinner. You know, if you're wanting to do a small window for feeding, skip dinner, but have breakfast. You know, get up in the morning, have something to eat within 90 minutes of being awake. And then if your window is 8 hours, then you eat for the next 8 hours and then you stop. But I don't usually encourage people. It's just harder for people. I don't encourage people to skip breakfast. And I think as a general rule, 12 and 12 is fine. So meaning that people eat for 12 hours, fast for 12 hours. Most of us should be able to do that. And that's very healthy for the body. But I think that particularly for women, if they are every day only eating for 6 to 8 hours, then you have to be really clear about what you're putting in your body. You have to be really attentive to meeting your nutritional needs. And I have nervousness around that because I have worked with so many people and I have them food log. And I see what people eat when they have 12 hours and they're not getting their nutritional needs met. And so if people only have, 6 to 8 hours, then you have to also be giving yourself the extra time in your day to focus on what are you going to eat in that time frame. It can't just be whatever's around, whatever's convenient. Like I'm just going to grab whatever I can fit into my schedule because it's in my feeding window and that's it. That won't work long term. That'll work short term. People will drop weight just because they're, dropping their calorie intake. But over the long term, you're going to develop nutritional deficiencies. So intermittent fasting can work. But if somebody wants to do it every day long term, you still have to focus on nutrition and you still have to put in the same investment of time into your intake and the meal prep or getting some kind of delivery service or somebody to cook for you so that you know that you're meeting your nutritional needs. And quite often people should probably be doing some supplementation.
Yeah, I was going to ask for those people who are always on the go and don't they have two challenges. They're not hungry in the morning and they don't have time to prepare. And I think this is also a problem with teenagers before going to the high school, you know?
Yes.
What would you suggest, like something they can eat that's healthy and easy to, you know, easily available?
So, I mean, there's a few things. Of course, I mean, you know, I am a mom. Mine are 23 and 20 now. So we're not at that stage anymore, except for when they come home and visit, which I cherish. So, I mean, but both of them were athletes when they were in high school, which meant that they would, you know, the volume of food that was required to sustain them was a lot. So I would boil a dozen eggs at least once a week. And I would make, you know, like 10 yams or 10 sweet potatoes at least once a week. I would make a huge pot of beans or grains or quinoa or whatever, so that it could be combined with other things or thrown onto a salad. I would make little jars of overnight oats, and I would add protein powder or collagen powder to that. Protein shakes are also great. So, you know, a boiled egg, somebody can grab and go. The overnight oats, somebody can grab and go. And then a protein shake, it's not hard to do. You know, it's just a couple powders, your plant-based milk, preferably. Maybe you do some frozen berries, and that's it.
Amazing. I love the idea. It's really doable.
Yeah, it's all very doable.
Yeah. And you can also do the protein shake the night before and keep it in the fridge.
Yes. Mm-hmm. For some people, they don't like how the texture changes, but you know, I mean, I used to always also keep, you know, the shaker bottles. I would have, you know, a couple of them on the counter with protein powder already in them, so that if it was really like getting down to it, all they would do is just pour milk in and go. You know, or if they needed to have something, if they were going to go, because one of my kids did school athletics in addition to club athletics. And so sometimes she'd be literally going from one practice to another practice. And so she'd have that in her bag, and she'd just add water. And it's probably not enough, but at least it's something.
I like that.
Better than like cookies or, you know, what often kids will grab.
A side question, would you recommend protein bars? And if you do, which ones?
Oh, this is just, it's such a hard one. So I really hope that out of this, some amazing company hears this and is like, hey, we meet all the criteria, talk about us. Because I just have yet to find the perfect offering. So I think they're fine, and I'll go through a couple of them, but they're not staples. And so, you know, because we're trying to force a pace in our lives that is not really realistic or sustainable, most of us are looking for convenience, and we're looking for something that we can fall back on. And it's okay if we do that from time to time in a pinch. Where the problem happens is when those things become staples. So the Lara bars, I do like only because the ingredients are clean. You know, all that it is dried fruit and nuts for the most. And there's no ingredients where you're left wondering, well, is that pea protein organic or is it not organic? Or, you know, how much of the brown rice syrup did they put in there? Because when you see something on the ingredients label, I mean, you don't really know, it's hard to evaluate it. So I'll usually tell people with protein bars, if you can find something that doesn't change blood sugar, that's ideal. But most of the time, those are going to use sweeteners. Rarely is it stevia. Usually it is going to be xylitol, which is a sugar alcohol. And that's okay from time to time, but it can irritate the digestive system. So if people have already some issues with gas and bloating and just not the best digestion, then using bars that have xylitol in them all the time is probably not the best bet. In that case, you're probably going to be better to go with something like a Lara bar, but just knowing that you're going to have a little bit of a blood sugar spike that will go with that. Anytime you have a bar that has, I'm not a big fan of anything that's got whey protein. If it has 30 ingredients, just, you know, look the other way. What besides the Lara bars? I
How
don't
do you
like the
spell the
kind
Lara?
bars.
How do you spell the Lara bars?
Lara.
Lara. Okay.
Yep. Um, I know that Bulletproof makes bars that are supposed to be pretty clean. And I know that, you know, as a company, they take great integrity in their ingredients and their sourcing. So as long as people digest them well, I do have a few clients that don't digest them well. So you just have to, you know, test that. And then the Pure bars, which I know are really popular, those are refrigerated. And the ingredients are clean. There's nothing artificial. But again, it's that they're really high in fat, really high in fat. And so unless somebody is actually testing their urine, monitoring all of their macros precisely, that might, and doing ketogenic is the implication, then I don't know that having that much fat on a regular basis is going to be a healthy way to go. Like you could do it from time to time, but you know, you can't, keto is one that you can't part-time do. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of mixed information out there around that. People hear that ketogenic is healthy, but the reality is that ketogenic is a very therapeutic diet, and it's a good one to pulse, meaning do it for a window of time and do it strictly, and then take a break, do it strictly, and then take a break. But you can't you can't do half your day keto and half your day not keto, because the combination of the sugars and fats will just be destructive.
Yeah, I hear it shouldn't be a lifestyle.
No.
Mm-hmm. So this brings me to my next question. How do eating habits affect our nervous dysregulation, and how can we help with that?
So what I was talking about earlier is one thing, which is maybe everyone should do a food log. It's really hard to get people to do it. But that being said, it's very illuminating. Once you start writing down what you're consuming, usually people are surprised because they realize that they're having more of the things that they didn't think they were having all that often, the bad stuff, and they're not having as much of the good stuff. And so you want to have an honest look at what your habits are. And 80-20 is a good rule, meaning that you're consuming health promoting 80% of the time, 20% is allowed for cheats. But it's important to understand what goes into the 20%. So all alcohol goes into the 20%, which would include wine. So wine goes in the 20%. Coffee, sugar, dairy, gluten, and any kind of, processed food, all of that goes into the 20%. So that means you can't be doing so much of that every day. So 80% of your diet is basically vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans, grains, and very clean animal proteins. Fruit, I'll typically encourage people to have only once a day. So if people just get chemicals out of their diet, that's going to bring their inflammation down one level, which means things like diet soda. And I mean, anything that you don't really recognize on a label. Next, you're going to bring your sugar down. You want to get sugar as completely out of your diet as you can. And then if people are consuming alcohol, like reduce it by 50%, reduce your coffee by 50%. You don't have to stop everything completely, but just gradually start reducing. Wheat is something I usually encourage people to get out completely because it's just so irritating to the gut. And then the next thing is how you eat. So it's how you eat, what you eat, when you eat, and why. And the how is, are you relaxed? And it's key. You can't be multitasking and eating. You have to be relaxed when you eat. Being relaxed when you eat is putting your nervous system into that parasympathetic state consciously. So if we eat when we're working on the computer, or we're driving in the car, or we're on the phone trying to handle something, then we're in stress and we're not going to get the nutrition out of our food. And it's just going to be all this extra work. And then we're probably going to end up with cravings an hour later because our body didn't get what it needed. So that the how is be relaxed when you eat, slow down, chew your food, enjoy your food. Don't have it be something that's happening, in the background. And then what is quality? We sort of already addressed that. Why? I always want people to ask why. Why are you eating?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you eating for nourishment? Are you eating solely for pleasure and that's it? Are you eating because you think that what you're eating is going to give you energy? Because if so, really look at what you're eating and evaluate if it will indeed do that or not. Or are you eating for loneliness or boredom or sadness or celebration? What are you expecting that food to give you? And there again is where that 80-20 rule comes in. Because really, when you're eating, you want to be eating to nourish your cells and to nourish your tissues and to nourish your organs. And I know that that doesn't always sound like fun, but being healthy is fun. Having our health and not being sick and not being ill is fun. Being sick is not fun. So, we have to make those trade-offs somewhere. And then the win is another really big one. I have a lot of clients, and in the beginning, all I'll do is have them focus on the win, because it's one of the hardest parts for people is to stop trying to fit food into their day where they can and start organizing their day around getting healthy food in the right timing. So when you get up, you want to eat within about 60 to 90 minutes of being awake. And then you want to eat about every 3 to 4 hours. Doesn't necessarily have to be a big meal. It could be breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner. But you don't want to go 6 hours and then 2 hours and kind of have this all over the place pattern. You want to eat in a really semi-controlled way. And so that means at the beginning of your day, you look ahead and you think, okay, well, I know I have this meeting and I know I have this phone call, and I need to make sure that I have something in that window. So what can I take with me? What can I pack that will work so that I get the nourishment I need at that time? And what's amazing is that as you start to create that steadiness and that stability, your energy is steady. People aren't as irritable. They think more clearly. They feel more calm. They're more responding than reacting. They don't have as many cravings. It's powerful. We really underestimate the role that our nervous system has in governing every other part of our life.
Wow, that's amazing. And I really agree with you. I see myself when I do that.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the stimulants and the coffee, the caffeinated drinks. What do you think of decaf coffee? Does it affect the nervous system?
So decaf coffee, if it's a cold water process or Swiss water process, it will be called either one. It's not going to have the same caffeine, so it's not as taxing to the nervous system. It is acid producing, not so friendly to the gut. So still something maybe like 1 cup a day, but not really more than that, but it's not going to have the same consequences to the nervous system.
I see. And Bridgette, what about supplements? Is there any supplements that can help with the nervous system?
Yep. So the adaptogens, as I mentioned, and with adaptogens, I always encourage people to try different formulas and different blends. Give it 2 to 3 weeks and see how your body responds. Because some people, for rhodiola, for example, is an adaptogen, and for some people it works really well for them, and for others it will create a little bit more of an anxious feeling. So the top adaptogens are ashwagandha, rhodiola, holy basil, ginseng, and then the lion's mane, turkey tail, cordyceps, the therapeutic mushrooms. And you can get the therapeutic mushrooms in powder and add them to a smoothie if you were doing a smoothie, or you can get them in a tincture form or in a capsule. And then the omegas, primarily the omega-3. So I really do think that as a supplement, doing that through fish oil is better. A fermented cod liver oil is a great way to go. You can get it in capsule because it also has vitamin D and vitamin A. And a lot of folks can actually double the recommended dose on the essential fatty acids. And that's when they'll really start to see a change or a shift. And that's because so many of us are deficient. So you can see the relationship between the essential fatty acids and the nervous system by just exploring all the research that's out there on using essential fatty acids to address anxiety and depression. And if you think about that, if you kind of take it back a minute, it's probably more that it's not treating it, it's resolving a deficiency, and the anxiety and depression were symptoms of the deficiency. And then magnesium would be another one. And then making sure someone's on a really good B complex. So not just B6 or B12, but a full B complex. And then if someone has vitamin D deficiency, oddly enough, vitamin D as well, because vitamin D behaves in the body like a hormone.
What about zinc?
So zinc is relevant in a lot of mood disorders. So in a lot of addiction and in a lot of mood disorders, zinc deficiency has a role. So it just depends on where someone, if they have deficiency or not. Typically with women, I will almost always put them on zinc, particularly if they have taken any kind of oral contraceptive or used an IUD, because that will create a tendency towards zinc deficiency. Also, people that are on a vegetarian or a vegan diet have a tendency towards zinc deficiency. Swimmers also, oddly enough, have a tendency towards zinc deficiency. And if anybody's had a high exposure to copper, which is a little of a peculiar thing because zinc and copper work synergistically. But zinc is tied to a lot of mood issues and addiction issues, which would be exacerbated with nervous system issues. So I don't know that zinc directly goes to the nervous system, but again, it's all connected.
Yeah, makes sense. This brings me to my last question. I love how you speak about self-care and how it's essential. Can you speak more about that and what self-care is?
Yes. So to me, from my point of view, personally, anecdotally as a practitioner, it's balance. I mean, I think that if I was going to try to sum it up, it's balance. And I always, it's kind of a joke, but it's not, is that the human body really likes moderation and human behavior likes extremes. So clearly self-care means making sure that you're hydrating enough, making sure that you're eating nourishing foods and that you're doing that in a way where you're practicing mindful eating, that you're getting in exercise and not too much, not too little, because if people over-exercise, that's hard on the nervous system. People don't exercise at all, that's hard on the nervous system. Another thing is to evaluate your relationships, right? So if all of our relationships are draining us and we don't have the comfort level with boundaries to tend to our own well, then we're going to be depleted and our nervous systems are going to be taxed and exhausted. And then, it's also things like taking a bath, knitting, having some kind of creative outlet, something that inspires you, something that brings you joy. And if you don't know what that is, then you try different things until you find it. Nature is one of the most powerful ways of nurturing the nervous system. And there's research on it, it's measurable now. And yet at the same time, what I think is so remarkable about that is that our measurements are only measuring what we think to measure rather than understanding that there is this dynamic relationship because we're a part of nature. And so when we spend time in nature, there are all kinds of shifts and healings and resets that are occurring that we might not even be conscious of. Another practice of self-care is getting enough sleep. So I mean, it really may just be the basics for one person. Like, wait, I only get 4 hours of sleep. I guess I need to focus on my sleep. I hardly drink any water. Maybe I just need to focus on hydration. And for someone else, maybe they're overtraining and they have to learn how to not push so hard. For somebody else, maybe they aren't moving at all. They have to learn how to do that. So it's looking at ourselves without being overly critical. We all have the inner critic. Just kind of having curiosity about our patterns that we fall into, and balancing out. If we know that we're over giving to a particular part of our life and we're not nurturing another, then it's redistributing that energy and evaluating that every couple of months to see if you need to make changes.
Yeah, and I love how you say that we need to put some time for self-care. It's a must. It's not
It is a must. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
not
A luxury, maybe.
It's not a luxury. Yeah. I mean, we're not used to thinking of it as a physical need, but it is actually a physical need. So rest is a physical need, and human connection, meaningful connection, is actually a biological and physical need. Shifting into parasympathetic is a physical need. It's something that our bodies need. We just aren't used to thinking about that way yet, because it's not what we learned.
Thank you, Bridgette. Always nice talking to you.
Likewise.